Hey, I want to welcome all of you to Christ Fellowship at all of our campuses across Dade County, as well as those of you who are joining us online. My name is Rick, and I serve as the lead pastor here, and we're so glad that you're here, especially if you're a first-time guest with us today. And if you were here last weekend for Easter and you came back today, I want to thank you for coming back this weekend. I sort of laid everything on the line last weekend, and bless your heart, I'm so glad that you came back. You know, we said that we were going to begin a series this week. We actually began it last weekend called I Wish I Knew What to Believe. I wish I knew that. And I told you that we were going to answer three fundamental questions. And let me just go over them one more time for you. You know, if maybe you're here today and you're an atheist, you would say, you know, I don't really believe there is a God. Maybe you believe in evolution. You were taught that in high school, university, and you're saying, I'm not sure I believe there's a God. So we're going to deal, you know, the first 3-4 weeks with that question, is there a God? Then after we cover that, if you track along with us, we'll answer the second question, which is the question of an agnostic. An agnostic would say, no, I believe there's a God. I'm just not sure which God it is. There's so many gods, so many religions, so many faiths out there. Every one of them say they have the way, that they're the only way, and I'm just not sure which one is the true God. I wish I knew. So we're going to answer the question of agnosticism and look at the evidence for that. And then finally, you know, if you say, yeah, I tracked with you, I kind of believe there's a God, and I believe the God of the Bible is a God, then we're going to answer the question, does God care about you, and does God care about me? So with all of that being said, I want you to open your Bibles today to the book of Hebrews. If you don't have a Bible, don't sweat it. It'll all come up on the screen. We'll be back and forth in the Gospel of John, which is, you know, the baseline for this series. But I want to invite your attention to Hebrews chapter 2 and Hebrews chapter 10 today to get us started. And while you're turning there, let me just share this with you. This summer, I speak to a group of missionaries in Europe. And I'm really excited about that because I love missionaries and what they do. But folks, while I'm there, I want to go to France because I want to see something there very, very special. And I'm not talking about the Eiffel Tower. No, what I want to see is a person, specifically a girl, namely her. Yeah. You see, when I was in high school, I studied art all 4 years, and I loved it. Now, mind you, I was not a great artist myself, but during that time, I became fascinated with the great artists. And I'm talking about the masters like Monet and Renoir, and especially Da Vinci. And folks, check this out. The masterpiece that fascinated me the most was the Mona Lisa. It was her. And get it, what makes this girl so fascinating is not who she is, but what she is. Let me say that again. What makes Mona Lisa so fascinating is not who she is, Mona Lisa, but what she is. And what is she? Here it is. She is the creation of the master himself. And folks, I am talking about Leonardo da Vinci. She is the crowning act of Da Vinci's creativity, the crowning act of his vision, the crowning act of his intelligence, and the crowning act of his design. And listen, because of what she is, you know, the creation of the master, because of that, she is the most valuable work of art in the world. I mean, no other work of art exceeds her value, which is why I want to see her. I got to see her. But I want you to imagine this happens. Imagine that, you know, I get there and I'm finally standing before the Mona Lisa, and I'm just fascinated that, you know, that Da Vinci made her. But imagine as I'm standing there, a guy walks up to me and says, I guess you think Da Vinci really created her, don't you? Kind of with a smirk. And I turn and I say, yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm fascinated with her. And he says, no, that's not what happened. Let me tell you what happened. Thousands and thousands of years ago, there was an explosion in a paint factory. Yeah, and the paint was jettisoned into the air. At the same time, across town in another factory, there was a giant explosion in a paper factory. And all of the paper came together and evolved into this canvas. We don't know how, but the canvas got across town. We think it was the elements. We think it was storms. It was environments that moved the canvas all the way across town. And it blew inside the factory where the paint was. And we don't know how, but the paint stayed wet. And over a period of time, it just rained down across the canvas. And it just evolved into her. That's how she came into existence. Now, folks, that would be an asinine theory. But if for some reason I believed that, it would instantly devalue her worth in my mind. I mean, even though I would be looking at a priceless treasure, I wouldn't know it. In fact, I would believe that I was looking at an accident. A painting accident that wasn't supposed to even happen in the first place. So, folks, my point is what she is determines her value. So the question is, what is she? Is she the outcome of a paint explosion that wasn't even supposed to happen? Or is she a masterpiece created by the master himself? The question is, what is she? Because that determines her value. Now, with that imagery in mind, I want you to listen to the question the Bible asks in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9. Here it is. Listen to this. Here's the question. What's the first word? What's the first word? Yeah. What is mankind? Now, mind you, the question is not who is mankind. That's a question of identity. No, this is more fundamental. This is more basic. The question here is, what are we? And folks, there's only two possible answers to that question. Here they are. Number one, there is a God. And this God created us, and therefore we are extremely valuable. We have incredible worth. That is the first possibility. The second possibility is that there is no God, and we evolved, and we are the outcome, the product of a giant cosmic explosion that wasn't even supposed to happen, and the result of mutations that led to us, and what we really are is nothing more than tricked out monkeys. All we are is nothing more than a high-class ape. And folks, with that in mind, here's my proposition today. This is what I want you to get. The question, is there a God, is more than an idle curiosity. Because listen, what you believe about the existence of God determines what you believe about you. Let me say it again. What you believe about the existence of God determines what you believe about your own existence and your own worth, your own value. You say, well, Rick, how can we know what to believe? You know, God bless you. Maybe you're here today and, you would say, Rick, I love the Bible. I learned about it as a child. But I had to tell you, Rick, I went off to the university. And I got to be honest with you, Rick, what I heard there in the classes that I took, I still love the Bible, but it really undermined my confidence in this document. Maybe that's where you are, and you're wondering, how can I know what to believe? Well, listen, we're going to answer that question beginning today as we kick off this series, which we've entitled, I Wish I Knew What to Believe. And I want to give you two thoughts to sort of jumpstart things today. Now, let me go ahead and tell you, we're just going to get started today, okay? So you got to follow this through. You got to hang with this thing over the coming weeks. And again, this is going to come across a lot more like teaching than preaching, so you're not going to go out with goosebumps. But hopefully, we lay a foundation today that will get us started. So how many of you have your listening guides? Wave those in the air. How many of you have apps with you? Wave those in the air. Great. At all of our campuses, I want you to note two things as well as you joining us online. Here they are. Number one, if you're filling in the blanks. Number one, God raises the ultimate question. God raises the ultimate question. Here it is. Listen to verse 6 again. Here's the question. What is mankind? What is, mankind? Now, folks, that is the most fundamental question of our existence. Not who are we, that's a question of identity. This is down to the lowest common denominator, and the question is, what are we? I mean, think about it. We find ourselves, living in this cosmic universe whose dimensions are beyond our comprehension. We have the capacity to think, reason, dream, hope, believe, see, hear. We have all of these capacities. But listen, the bottom line question that we have to come to terms with is this. Here's the question. What the heck are we? And we're not the first ones to ask the question. Listen again to verse 6. Listen to what it says. That there is a place where someone's testified. Somebody's asked this question already. What is mankind? And again, Christ Fellowship, there's only two possible answers. In fact, can I tell you something? You can't even think of a third possible answer. There's only two. Here they are. Write them down as A and B. At all of our campuses, write this down. Here's the possibilities. A, man is the result of evolution. Man is the result of evolution. Now, folks, this is a belief, and it is the belief that is articulated and written in many of our secular textbooks. For example, here's a quote from the National Association of Biology Teachers. Here's the quote. Listen to this quote. The diversity of life on Earth is the outcome of evolution. In other words, this is taught as dogma. There's no challenge to it. It is the outcome of evolution. What is evolution? Here it is. An unsupervised, impersonal, no person involved, unpredictable, and random process of genetic modification that is affected by natural selection, chance, and changing environments. Man is the result, listen to this, man is the result of a purposeless process that did not have him in mind. End quote. That is a belief. And that is taught at a lot of our universities and secular institutions. That man is nothing more than a cosmic blunder that wasn't supposed to happen. Put another way, we are a universal oops. And that being the case, Francis Crick, who is an atheist on steroids, writes this about you. So he's like pointing the finger at you, and here's what he says. He says, you, with your joys, your sorrows, your memories, your ambitions, your sense of personal identity, and your free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of molecules. Then he says this, what you are, that's the question of the text, what is mankind? He says, what you are is nothing more than a pack of neurons. End quote. What is mankind? According to the evolutionists, you're nothing more than a pack of neurons. Now, don't you feel better about yourself? Aren't you glad you came to church? Well, folks, picture it. The professor stands before the teenager who arrives on the university and with no challenge says dogmatically, oh, you think you're the crowning act of God's creation? That's what you think? No way. Let me tell you what you are. You're nothing but a pack of neurons. You're a cosmological blunder. You weren't even supposed to happen. You oozed out of the slime along with the snail, the beetle, and the weasel. You're just a tricked out ape, a high-class monkey. That is all you are. You have no purpose and you have no significance other than that. Now, go enjoy life. That is a belief. That is an answer that is given. But there's a second belief, a second answer, and write this down as B. The second one is man is the direct creation of an omniscient God. In other words, there is a God, and he is an omniscient, all-knowing, and all-powerful God, and you and I are the direct outcome of a creative process that he began. We are the direct result of his creation. And folks, if that is what you are, then you are highly significant. You are meant to be on this earth. There was a time when God made a decision to bring you into this world, and he brought you into this world, and he has a plan for your life, and he wants to have a relationship with you that will last forever. And what I love is this. Write this down as number 2. Complexity is the evidence that there is a God. Complexity that we see everywhere we look is the evidence that there is a God. Now, with that in mind, listen to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Remember this verse from last week? It says, now faith is the substance and the evidence of things not seen. And we talked about that last week. God does not call us to blind faith. God calls us to a faith that is built on substance and evidence. And watch what happens when we see the evidence. Remember I said last week, Jesus says, just come follow me. You don't have to believe. You don't have to commit to anything. Just follow me long enough to see the evidence, because when you see the evidence, then you'll believe. Watch what happens. Verse 3. Here's the consequence. By faith, that is not blind faith, that's faith built on evidence. By that kind of faith, what's the next word? We understand. We get it. Translation, the light goes off. We comprehend it. Folks, I love that, because understanding is a phenomenon that occurs inside of your brain. In other words, when you understand, something triggers inside of your brain that enables you to understand, that enables you to comprehend, that enables you to know. And what is it that triggers understanding? Here it is again. It's always evidence. Evidence. And why is that? It's because evidence dispels guesswork. Evidence dispels ambiguity. Evidence dispels doubts. And evidence generates certainty, so that you know what to believe. Not you wish you knew, but evidence enables you to know what to believe. That's why God is always saying, look at the evidence, look at the evidence. Faith built on evidence, faith built on evidence. Now listen to verse 3 again. By faith built on evidence, we understand. We intellectually understand. And what do we intellectually understand? Here it is. That the universe was what? Say it like you mean it. It was what? It was formed at God's command. Now, folks, what is that? You know what that is? That's the creative event, isn't it? That's creation. But watch how God articulates the antithesis of creation. Watch this. He says that the universe was formed at God's command. Here's the antithesis. So that what is seen was not made out of what is what? Seen. Now, folks, that's a perfect definition of the theory of evolution. By the way, don't you love the way God frames the creation-evolution debate right there in one concise sentence? But get it, evolution says everything you see, with all of its beauty, with all of its wonder, with all of its design, with all of its architecture, was made from what you see. In other words, evolution says the elements of the periodic table somehow magically evolved into all of the beauty, the wonder, and the complexity that we see everywhere we look in the universe. That's what evolution says. Evolution says it is the product of what is seen. What you see came from what is seen. It made itself. But God says evolution is not what the evidence indicates. Listen to what he says in verse 3. By faith, that is by faith built on evidence, we intellectually understand that the universe was what? It was formed. The Greek word there, formed, by the way, is a translation of the Greek word kartartizo. It literally means to frame something. In fact, if you have the King James, it says framed. But the idea is to frame. Kartartizo means to frame, it means to design, it means to engineer, and then it means to make something. And it always indicates high complexity. But folks, what I love in this text right here is how God frames the creation-evolution debate right there in one concise sentence. And he did so 2,000 years before Darwin came up with the theory of evolution. It's almost like God gives a preemptive strike before the thought even got here. But the question is, how can we know what to believe? There's only one way you can know. Your brain demands what? Evidence. Evidence. That's why Jesus said, follow, look at the evidence, you'll understand, and then you can believe. Folks, let me say it again. God never wants to bypass your brain and go for your gut. God always wants you to engage your brain, and so do we. I'll never forget a guy saying to me one time, he said, Rick, he said, it seems like every church I've ever gone to, he said, I felt like when I sat down in the seat, I could unscrew my head and put it under the seat because nothing was going to affect me from here up. It was all pure emotionalism. That's not God's way. It's not the way we want to deal with things here either. We want you to engage your mind. And so, folks, what we're going to do in this series is we are going to marshal evidence like a trial lawyer. We're going to marshal all of the evidence and then submit it to you, and we're going to ask every time. Simple question. What does the evidence indicate? Not what were you taught at the university, not what did your grammar school teach you, not what did mama teach you, not what did Pastor Rick say. What I have to say, what they have to say is inconsequential. We want to look at what does the evidence indicate about the existence of God and the existence of us. Again, listen to verse 6. But there is a place where someone's testified, what is mankind? Here's what God's answer is. The Word of God says you, that is God. God, you did what? You made them. You made them. Translation, this incomprehensibly complex God made us. And folks, the smoking gun that there is a divine creator is the mind-exploding complexity that we see everywhere we look. I don't care if you look out at the universe or look down at the atom. It's everywhere you look, complexity, complexity, complexity. And I got to tell you, when I started working on this message this week, I struggled. And I'll tell you what I struggled with. I didn't know where to start. I went to my staff. I said, I don't know where to start. I'm asking Rhonda, honey, I don't know where to start. You know what the problem with creation is? You know what the real problem with defending creation is? And I'm not overstating this. There's too much evidence. There's too much to deal with. Where do you even start? Do I want to start in space? Do I want to start with the molecules? Do I want to go down into the atomic structure? Because there is complexity on both ends. So where do I begin this argument? So I made up my mind this week, after just racking my mind, I made up my mind to start with you. To start with you as an individual. So I want you to write this down as Exhibit A. Your brain. Your brain. You know, I said last weekend that tucked inside the skull of your head is a 3-pound jelly-like mound that looks like crinkled Play-Doh. It's your brain, and it's actually a network of over 100 billion neurons. Neurons that are all directly connected to each other through a billion microscopic fibers called dendrites. And folks, because of these billion direct connections called dendrites, Your brain can perform a staggering number of calculations instantly. Let me say that again. Your brain can perform a staggering number of calculations instantaneously. You know, I was thinking, how do I get you to understand this? How do I get you to walk out of here and go, yeah, that was simple enough, I get it. I was thinking about this. Imagine this scene. Imagine you're at a party, and a buddy of yours standing 30 yards away throws a football in your direction without any prior warning. He just hurls the football at you. Listen, in a split second, your brain will calculate the velocity of that ball at 31 miles per hour, the trajectory of that ball, and the vector at which that ball will descend instantaneously. Simultaneously, it will send detailed electronic messages at 300 miles per second to the muscles in your legs, the muscles in your arms, to either tell you to speed up or slow down so that you and the ball intersect perfectly and you catch it. And listen, you will not even have to think about the process. Your brain just makes those calculations and you don't even go, wow. It just does it. It's the most complex mass in the universe. Nothing rivals it. So my question is this. It's a simple question. Is it more logical, more rational, and more scientific to believe that your brain evolved on its own, just came into existence with no personality, it was all totally impersonal, just, the universe randomly put that thing together on its own? Is it more rational, logical, and scientific to believe that? When I hear that, I think, seriously? Seriously? You want me to believe that? Folks, I don't have the faith to believe that. I don't have the faith to believe that because I don't see the evidence for that. We're going to talk about fossils and mutations and all that stuff. I just don't see the evidence for that. In fact, listen, that's very impressive language. It's erudite language. But when you think about it, it's intellectual suicide. And I'm telling you, I think what we're going to see as time goes along, because more and more scientists are moving away from this. Because this kind of subjective, quote-unquote, science is destroying the objectivity and the credibility of other sciences, and a lot of scientists are starting to back away from it and saying, I can't buy that. It just doesn't make sense. My brain doesn't have the faith to believe that. Even though it's critical scientists just are getting to a point to where they're saying, I can't buy that. Tell you what, hold that thought. I want to go back to your brain. Because the same brain, this is incredible, the same brain that can calculate the trajectory of that ball, the vector of it, move you into position to catch it, at the same time that it's doing that, it is controlling all of the systems inside of your body. You know the story. You have a spinal cord that runs down the spine of your back. It then spreads out and connects directly to every system in your body. And while your body is catching the ball, your brain is controlling and dictating and triggering and firing all of those systems. And folks, I want you to write this down as exhibit. This is one I thought of too late before the notes went out. So just write it under exhibit B, write it exhibit C. Put down your physiological systems. The complexity of the systems in your body point to design, not random, arbitrary mutations. For example, look at this. You have a skeletal system. It's like the framework of a steel building. This is what holds you together. Only you're not a rigid steel building. Just everybody hold up your hands. Hold up your hands. Look at the complexity of your skeletal system just in your hands. Look at the marvel of your thumb. It enables you to pick things up, to grasp things, to hug your baby, to love. It is incredible. It is a skeletal system, and it's in you. Not only do you have a skeletal system, you have a muscular system. And this muscular system is what your brain sends electronic messages to move you so that you're not rigid like a structure. You're mobile, you're tactile. You have a muscular system. How about this one? This is all inside of you. And your brain is making it all work, and you're not even thinking about it. It's just doing it. You have a digestive system. I ate a cracker on purpose before I came out here, so you can be thinking, this cracker is being taken care of. And I'm not even thinking about it. I'm preaching, and here's what's happening. You have teeth up here. You have these grinders right at the right place to grind up your food. And then you swallow, and guess what happens when you swallow? There's a flap, you know what I'm talking about, I'm just being simple, a flap between your esophagus and your windpipe, for lack of a better word, that closes off your windpipe every time you swallow. If that flap weren't there, every time you ate, it would go down your windpipe. You would have been dead long ago. The human species would be out of existence. Aren't you glad God put a flap right there? Think about this. Think of where your grinders are, your teeth. They're at the top, so that when you swallow it, gravity pulls it down. What if your grinders were in your feet? What if your teeth were down there? You know, I think about it. Every time you ate, you'd have to stand on your head to digest your food. You know, hey, Bob, you want to go play golf? No, I'm on my head right now trying to get my food to digest. Everything is perfectly aligned and perfectly structured. How about this one? You have a cardiovascular system that is run by a force pump that pumps blood through 75,000 miles of arteries and veins, capillaries, to send life-giving fluid, blood, to the 60 trillion cells in your body. And if this thing fails to work, you'll know it. Believe me, I know firsthand. You'll know it's not working. How about this one? You have not only a cardiovascular system, you have a respiratory system. Doctors, physiologists, scientists try to study this thing, and they cannot touch the hem of the garment of any of these systems to understand how they work, and your brain is making every one of them function as you're listening to me talk. You have a neurological system, a nervous system that enables you to feel good, pain. You have a lymphatic system. And I can go on and on and on. These are all systems within your body. You have a waste treatment system. You have a reproductive system. You can make another one of these. Just as complex in detail, and have a great time making it. Isn't it good that God said, you know, I need them to make some more, so I'm going to make it so much fun that they want to make more. You have an immune system, a dermatological system. You have an auditory system. You have a verbal system. All of these systems. And let me tell you, if any of those systems fail, it's like a failure on the space shuttle. It is catastrophic. I mean, if some little minute thing goes wrong in here and here or here, any of these systems, it's catastrophic to your life. It can even kill you. By the way, I said it's more complex than the space shuttle. The systems in your body, their complexity make the complexity of the space shuttle look like a kindergarten's drawing. Let me ask you this, by the way. Yeah, there it is. If you don't walk up the space shuttle, let me ask you a question. Is it possible that the space shuttle evolved? I mean, I'm just asking you, is it possible? Is it possible that, thousands of years ago there was a hurricane and it blew through a junkyard? And it just whirled all these steel parts and metal parts, and it went through another yard and picked up, wires and over changing environments. It just, started assembling in this thing, and boy, it was, it took a long time, but it just kept happening, and somehow it went through a fuel yard, and it mixed all the, the super cool liquid chilled hydrogen, and it put it in this tank that has the insulation around it, and, it got the engines together, assembled those, and then, it lit up, and off she goes, into space. Here's the question. Is it possible that assembled just out of the blue? Is it possible? Is it possible? Let's just say for the sake of the argument that it's possible. Here's the next question. Is it probable? Is that probably what happened? In other words, would you walk up to the space shuttle and say, probably what happened here is, there was a junkyard, and would you say that? Or would you say, no, the complexity of that machine leads me to believe that somebody designed it, somebody envisioned it, somebody dreamed it, they built that thing. What would logic, rationale, and scientific evidence cause you to conclude? Why would we look at this marvel, not me, this, and say it evolved? Why do we do that? And throw out creation? I just don't understand it. Let me give you one more exhibit B, and then I'm going to stop. I got to hurry. Exhibit B, the complex simple cell. You said, Rick, that's an oxymoron. You're not supposed to say that. I know. But for this one, I want to take you on a journey down into your molecular self. We're going to go down past your skin, kind of past your macroscopic self, I guess that's the way you say it, down into your microscopic self, down into the world of your cells. You've got 60 trillion of them in your body. By the way, Charles Darwin thought a cell, this is the guy everybody's following, he thought a cell was a blob of protoplasm. It's just a blob. That's why he called it the simple cell. But folks, the 20th century saw an explosion of knowledge down into the cell. And when we look down into a single human cell, the best way to describe what we see is a city. A complex, organized, entire molecular city that on a microscopic scale would rival the city of Miami. And you've got 60 trillion of these cities that are as complicated as the city of Miami. When we look down into the cell, we see complex energy systems. We see complicated defense systems against biological invaders. We see communication links inside and out to other cells. We see transportation systems that deliver nutrition within the cell and to other parts of other cells. We actually see garbage trucks that pick up the cell metabolism, pick up the trash which would kill you if it wasn't picked up. In every cell, there's a garbage truck, garbage people who ride up, pick it up, and take it out into your bloodstream so that it's excreted through your glands, your other body parts, so that your body can get rid of that. Now, folks, we talk about all of this complexity. There's more complexity really in the single cell than there is right there in all of these systems. How did this happen? What in the world are we? Is it more scientific, more rational, and more logical to say nobody engineered us, nobody thought of us, nobody had a purpose for this? Or is it more rational, more logical, more scientific to say there is an intelligence beyond our comprehension who made us? David, the prophet, said, he looked up to the heavens and he said, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. He had no idea, did he, just how fearfully and wonderfully made we are. And by the way, folks, these physiological systems that we see in the human body, they're in every animal, insect, and species we see, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's all different. In fact, Autumn had some kind of a project last week where she had to get an earthworm. So, she goes and finds an earthworm, and we're kind of looking and doing a little bit of reading on earthworms. And we just had an earthworm look, An earthworm, turns out, doesn't have a heart, but he's got 5 mechanisms that stretch throughout that little worm that are not hearts, but they function like a heart, and they disperse blood all down through that earthworm. And folks, if he doesn't have all 5, he goes out of existence. Is it more logical, more rational, more scientific to say, poof? Or is it more logical, more scientific, more rational to say, there's an incredible God out there who made all of this? God bless the atheists. God bless the evolutionists. But you know what, folks? They're digging around in the dirt, trying to find something to prove evolution. And they find fossils, and we're going to talk about fossils. But most of the fossils only prove the biblical flood. They don't support evolution. But God says to us, you don't need to dig around in the dirt. Just look everywhere you look. As far out into the universe as you can see, and as far down into an atom as you can see. Everywhere you look, complexity, complexity, complexity. Design, design, design. Architecture, architecture, architecture. It's everywhere we look. And God says you can start just by looking at you. Just look at you. And here's how this concludes. I want to close with this. Listen to what the Bible says. Hebrews 2:6. But there's a place where someone's testified. What is mankind? That you are what? Mindful of him. Do you know that God's mindful of you? We're going to talk about this. And the Son of Man, that you what? You care for him. Do you know God cares about you deeply? Here's what we are. You made them a little lower than the angels, and you what? Crowned them with glory and honor. You know, God never says he crowned the angels with glory and honor. But when God made the decision to bring you into this world, and he did, for a purpose, for a reason, he crowned you. You're the crowning act of God's creation. And he crowned you with glory, and he crowned you with honor. And he loves you. He cares about you. He desperately wants to have a relationship with you that will last forever and ever. But it's up to you. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Would you join me? We have a lot more to cover, a lot more evidence to look at, a lot more questions to answer. But maybe today, for the first time, you're starting to realize exactly what you are. You're not what you heard. You're not what somebody told you. But you're finding out that you're actually the creation of God. You're made in his image, which means there's something of you. There's something of God in you. You're like him. And maybe you're realizing how valuable you really are and what you mean to God. And maybe you wish you had a relationship with him. Perhaps you wish that you had everlasting life. In fact, if you're here today, while every head is bowed, every eye is closed, if you would say, Rick, I know I have everlasting life. I know I have a relationship with God. If you know that beyond any shadow of a doubt, would you lift up your hand as a testimony to that fact? God bless you. Many hands. You can put your hands down. You know, perhaps, again, you weren't able to raise your hand. And we went through this last week. And maybe the reason you didn't raise your hand is because you're saying, Rick, I don't know that I have everlasting life. I don't know that I have a relationship with God. But you know what, Rick? I do believe there's a God. And I do wish I had a relationship with him. Listen, if that's the desire of your heart while nobody's looking around, you say, Rick, I need what you're talking about. I need God. If that's your prayer while nobody's looking around, I want to pray for you. If that's your prayer, would you, again, just slip up your hand and just say, Rick, pray for me. I see your hand. God bless you. Many hands are going up. Would you put your hand up and leave it up? Nobody's going to bother you, I promise. I just want to see so I can pray for you. Kind of put it up high so I can see. Yeah, God bless you. If your hands are up in the balcony at all of our campuses, yeah, if your hand is up, let me tell you, all over our campuses in Miami, you're not alone. You've got your hands up with people who feel exactly what you're feeling now. And I've got great news for you. If you raised your hand, listen, you don't have to walk out of here separated from God. You can walk out of here different than you were when you came in. You came in separated from God. You go out knowing him personally and having everlasting life. You say, Rick, how do I do that? How do I get everlasting life? How do I begin a relationship with God? It's not simplistic, but it is simple. The Bible says this, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How do you get saved? How do you become a son of God, a daughter of God? You call on him. You don't have to join this church. You don't have to sign anything. All you have to do is call. and ask. If you're not sure how to do that, let me help you. Let me lead you in a prayer. You pray this prayer right where you're seated. You can put your hands down, folks. God bless you. But right where you're seated, you pray this prayer, not to me. This is not scripted. You pray this to God. He will hear you quietly in your heart. Dear Heavenly Father, I believe that you exist. I believe the reason I exist is because you made me. You made the decision to bring me into this world. And God, I want to have a relationship with you, one that will last forever. And so right now I ask you to forgive me of all of my sins, past sins, present sins, even my future sins. Cleanse them all. Make me your son, your daughter, and give me everlasting life. Thank you so much, Heavenly Father, for loving me and making me your child. Help me to spend the rest of my days loving you and being loved by you. In your name I pray. Amen. Christ Fellowship, if you're glad for those who prayed that prayer, would you let them know it?